Good morning, my neighbors!
Well, good morning, you sexy mother hubbards. Humza Yousaf is gone, but so have the majority of the refugees being earmarked for Rwanda. And look who suddenly cares about audience bias on Question Time. It's time for an alternative paper review.
Prince Andrew's a nonce burger.
But first up to the Daily Express this morning. Hunt, tax cuts are a priority. Oh, man, that's a shame, isn't it? Because over the weekend, I had some hope for the Express. They seemed to be warming to the incoming Keir Starmer-led Labour government, but no, now they've pivoted very much back to being the mouthpiece for CCHQ. Tax cuts are the priority, which I assume is, a bit of a typo, because basically how you would fund the tax cuts is you would slash public services. So really that's what it should say. It should say slashing your public services. That is the priority for us. Not paying compensation to those affected by the contaminated blood scandal. That's how we're going to pay for this. Tax cuts are the priority. Yep, we care more about slashing inheritance tax, of which, only a fraction of Britain would ever really benefit from. We care more about taking another penny off national insurance because we think it might get us a few more votes, but actually it won't move the dial at all. We care about all of that more than disability benefit, contaminated blood, or adequately funding your local hospital or care home. Just remember that. Just remember that exact headline. Hunt says tax cuts are the priority. Remember that when they evict you from your £2,000 a month care home. Next up to the Telegraph, where former editor Charles Moore says left-wing audiences are bringing shame to Question Time. This is a story that right-wing readers of the Tory graph appear to be somewhat disgruntled at the visage of a reasonably balanced Question Time audience. Now, for those of you who are perhaps unaware, Question Time is one of the BBC's flagship politics shows. Every week, they drag themselves to a different corner of the formerly Great Britain. They populate a panel with politicians and journalists. They put a question out to the audience, and then the panel have to sort of respond. They take it into... The idea is that you have a constructed debate, and you reach a sort of consensus, but it very rarely happens. And Question Time over the years has been accused of Tory bias, pro-Brexit bias. There's been graphs and charts created over the years, like graphical images, to illustrate the weighting that show has towards right-wing and think tank types. People like Kate Andrews from Tufton Street, people like Julia Hartley-Brewer, Nigel Farage has been on there a gazillion times. It was the show where Lawrence Fox first got into trouble for running his mouth. Conversely, they very rarely have representatives from, the Green Party. I don't think they've ever had Femi Oluwole on. Left-leaning comments or questions or clapbacks are routinely cut short by the host, Fiona Bruce. Like a typical episode of Question Time will be like, they'll have a Tory MP, a Telegraph journalist, and then a think tank person, all very, very right-leaning. And then on the left side, they'll have, Wes Streeting or Yvette Cooper. Somebody who sort of sits on the right of the left, if that makes sense. Anyway, for one reason or another, there's been a couple of editions of it recently where there has been more of a sort of left-leaning flavour. It has appeared to be somewhat more balanced. And Lawrence Fox dismissing the idea of white privilege, the successive refusal to even broach the subject of Brexit and its successes or failures, and Fiona Bruce's own personal life leaning towards the right. All of that be damned. Charles Moore, former editor of The Telegraph, he thinks this sort of vague representation of left of centre sensibilities, he thinks this is what brings shame onto Question Time. Over to the Times now, who report that over half of the refugees who were being earmarked for Rwanda have subsequently gone missing. Incredible. So frequent and fervent viewers and subscribers will recall that over the weekend, the Home Office embarked on a new initiative. They decided that, not for practical or pragmatic reasons, they decided that as we are in the run-up to a general election now, they would go out on an unnecessary campaign and decide they were going to round up all the immigrants, detain them, and then ship them off to Rwanda, just in time for people to go to the ballot box. And they advertised this over the weekend, they briefed it out to journalists who then put it out into the broadsheets. They promoted this to Express readers and Telegraph readers as an impending policy designed to show erstwhile Conservatives who were thinking of leaving for reform that James Cleverly and Rishi Sunak were taking this seriously because look, they're being cruel and mean-spirited to migrants. Now, where that sort of ridiculous PR might curry favour from our least favourite bilge hydrants from right-wing hate pamphlets, unfortunately, it's greeted a little differently in asylum seeker quarters. Because if the government are briefing that they're going to round these people up when they next attend their Home Office assessment, if you were an asylum seeker and you read that and your assessment was on Monday or Tuesday this week, I don't know, I'm going to go out on a limb here. This is just a wild stab in the dark. I'm going to guess you're probably not going to attend it. Cue the majority of these asylum claimants now going AWOL on the Home Office. Now, I would say this would be really concerning, actually quite frightening for people like James Cleverly and indeed anybody that's working in the Home Office. I mean, imagine being tacitly responsible for hundreds of refugees going missing. But I don't know if you remember, but they lost 200 under 18 refugees last year. And honestly, the Tory response in the House of Commons was literally, well, yeah. Well, they shouldn't have come here then, should they? I don't know, man. It's wild, isn't it? Like, between turning a blind eye to what's happening in Gaza and not giving a shit what happens to these refugee kids, like, the Tories are responsible for more children disappearing than Myra Hindley. It's such a strange country that we live in now, isn't it? Where they just don't care about kids going missing. They don't care about disabled people. They don't care about old folks who can't afford the care home bills. Do you know how we know that they don't care about any of these things? Because tax cuts are the priority. Finally, to the Daily Mail, who say that all schools now are being warned about a sextortion epidemic. Now, I don't know if any of you are really aware of this problem, but it is actually quite serious. So, to be fair to the Mail, I mean, I know they put out a lot of rubbish, not least this last weekend when they tried to misrepresent something that was going on in a London park. But this is actually a really scary story. Because you got kids, right? Kids go on the internet, a lot of the time unsupervised. Like, maybe if they're really young, you're like, okay, let's just check you got the parent guard on, you're not looking at anything too dodgy. Then they get to like 14 or 15, you're like, well, okay, don't go looking for dodgy stuff. I'll just sort of stop looking over your shoulder every Tuesday. You have a right to some privacy. Then they got their chat rooms, their WhatsApps, their year 9 and year 10, like, chat things that they're all a part of. Discord, Instagram, YouNow. But anyway, evidently, there appears to be sort of criminal gangs internationally who are targeting British teens. They build up a relationship with these kids. They persuade them to send them pictures, like nothing particularly porny, but just maybe like slightly revealing. It would be slightly embarrassing for them if it got out. And then they hook them in and they blackmail them. And this is a problem that needs to get solved urgently. But how do you fix this problem when the tech companies are global? Like, are they even in our British legal jurisdiction? Plus, you're dealing with companies who are reliant on the attention economy. So for them, they don't really want to put in restrictions that stop people in Nigeria, China, or Russia from signing up for their service, because the more eyeballs they have on their web pages, the more money they make as a corporation. It's like if you take Twitter as an example, right? I've always said, I think everyone should have to verify their account with a phone number for the place that they say that they exist in. Then I, as a user, I should have a filter, and I should be able to say, I don't want to see in my feed, I don't want to see any accounts or any tweets from anybody that hasn't verified their account with a 44075 blah, blah, blah. So that I know that the people that I'm viewing their content, that they are British accounts and that they are real people. And if they say something hateful or really, really abusive, that Twitter have a phone number that they can hand over to the authorities and that person could be handled accordingly. Like, I think I should have that right as a user. But Twitter, or X, have decided that in order for them to make money, they need the most amount of accounts on there. And this is true even before Elon Musk came along. They could absolutely restrict that experience. They could afford me that safety that I'm looking for, but they choose not to, because that would vastly restrict the number of accounts who are on there, or it would commercially embarrass them, because if they put it in now, like retrospectively, you would quickly see how many millions of accounts are just bot, fake news, misinformation devices. So anyway, back to this Mail front page, the sextortion stuff. What can we do in a UK legal jurisdiction to protect British teens from getting into this kind of problem? Well, you can tell your kids, oh, don't go on anything that I check everything with me first. But you know that they won't do that. Kids, teenagers, they've never listened to their parents. So that is just not going to happen. It's like the modern equivalent of like, remember when you go to the party, Sandra, just say no. And she would have been like, all right. See you later, Dad. So they're going to go onto these websites. They're going to join these chat groups. How do we make them safer? Do you have any faith that the UK government, whether it's Tories or Labour, will be in a position to make these user experiences safer, when actually where Britain is at the moment is more in a period of deregulation rather than adding it? If somebody in the Treasury thinks there's money to be made and growth to be had from deregulating the UK tech space, I'm sorry to tell you, that is exactly what they will do. You know, we see it with Thames Water, we see it with the betting and gambling space, and you will probably also see it with internet safety. If not for any other reason than that we're dealing with a political class of people who have shown time and again that they are wide open to lobbying. You know, like, oi, if I sling you a sack of cash over here, will you cut the red tape? And whose own personal understanding of technology seems to top out at either losing their WhatsApps or getting technologically compromised themselves. Guys, that's it for this one. Friday night's podcast is now out to everyone on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and out to everybody on YouTube. There'll be a new solo show out tonight for the Patreons and YouTube community members. If you want to join either of those, there's links in the description below. Peace!